Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are taking a seriously deep dive into what I like to call the blueprint of reality. And honestly, what absolutely blew my mind when digging into these source materials is this undeniable, incredibly consistent pattern. We're talking about completely isolated, ancient global traditions spanning thousands of years, all pointing to the exact same profound secret about how the universe actually operates. And the crazy part? Modern cognitive science is literally starting to back them up. So we're going to explore this shared theory that the physical universe is, at its core, merely a mental projection. But more importantly, we are going to look closely at the shared mechanics across all these texts of how mastering this mental projection theoretically unlocks things we'd normally just call magic. We're talking superhuman capabilities, levitation, instant manifestation, bending time. It's a wild ride, so let's get right into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, the universal mental blueprint. Second, the illusion of separation. Third, superhuman capabilities. Fourth, the mechanics of magic. Fifth, the path of self-emptying. And finally, the ultimate non-dual reality.
Section 1. The universal mental blueprint. To wrap our heads around how these superhuman capabilities could even be possible, we first have to lock down the foundational premise shared across all our source texts. Take a look at this massive paradigm shift from the ancient Sanskrit text, the Yoga Vasista. It states, the physical universe is a projection of the mind. The world has no objective reality outside of our perception. Basically, it's arguing that without a conscious observer, the physical world just doesn't exist as an objective thing. It's purely subjective. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's just ancient philosophy. But what's absolutely fascinating is how perfectly this ancient idea lines up with cutting-edge scientific theories today. And this right here perfectly illustrates that grand historical convergence I was talking about. We're looking at highly diverse systems spanning thousands of years. You have Advaita Vedanta in India, Sufism in the Middle East, Christian mysticism over in Europe, and Hermetism from ancient Egypt and Greece. These cultures were separated by oceans and centuries, right? Yet they all independently describe the exact same undivided absolute reality. Whether they refer to it as Brahman, Wujud, Gottheit, or the All, the consensus is totally unified. The universe is simply a mental creation happening within one divine mind. It's like a giant universal thought that we're all living inside of. Section 2. The illusion of separation. So, the obvious question is, if we are all actually part of this one massive universal mind, why on earth do you and I feel so incredibly small, limited, and bound by the physical rules of gravity and time? The answer to that question is shockingly consistent whether you ask an ancient sage or a modern scientist. In traditions like Advaita Vedanta, the physical world is referred to as Maya. That translates to an unreal appearance, essentially a grand illusion that gets superimposed right over top of absolute reality. Now fast forward to today, cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman proposes what he calls interface theory. He argues that space and time are not objective reality at all. They are just a cognitive interface. Think of it exactly like the desktop on your computer. The little blue folder icon on your screen isn't actually a blue folder inside the machine, right? It's a simplified interface hiding the massively complex, raw binary code of your hard drive so you can actually use the computer. According to both ancient mystics and modern science, physical reality is essentially just a localized 3D desktop hiding the pure consciousness underneath. So, what is it that ties us so desperately to this 3D desktop interface? Well, it's our ego. In Sikh philosophy, they call this deeply ingrained illusion haumai. In Sufism, that's known as the nafs. It is this intense, almost unbreakable illusion that you are a separate, finite little self completely disconnected from everything else. This ego generates all duality. It creates that exhausting, everyday friction of me versus the entire world. You know that feeling when you're stuck in awful traffic during your commute, or when you're dealing with a difficult coworker? That's the ego at work. And it's this exact illusion of separation that keeps our focus completely locked onto the physical interface, totally blinding us to the actual source code running in the background.
Section 3. Superhuman capabilities. Okay, here's where things get really, really exciting. Because if the world is just a mental projection, if it really is just a cognitive interface, then mastering your own mind theoretically means you can hack the projection itself.
Let me share this absolutely mind-bending story of Queen Lila from the Yoga Vasishta to show you what I mean. The text tells us that when her husband dies, Queen Lila goes into this incredibly deep trance to go find him in the mental space, a realm called the Chittakas. Now, get this. In the physical, waking world, her trance lasted a grand total of 48 minutes. But within that mental ether, Lila and her husband experienced an entire, richly detailed 70-year lifetime together. The text uses this story specifically to prove that space and time are not these rigid, unbreakable laws of physics. They are just completely malleable, localized mental parameters. And a highly trained mind, it can just override them. It is wild to see an ancient text so closely mirroring the kind of time dilation ideas we now explore in modern quantum mechanics and sci-fi movies. When you start looking across all these disparate ancient texts, the sheer variety of powers, which are often known as cities, that they claim can be unlocked, is staggering. But the underlying mechanism they describe is always exactly the same. We are talking about bending space and time to literally fit entire universes within a single mustard seed, or a power called anima, which is the ability to shrink down to the size of an atom. There are widespread accounts of levitation or walking in the skies. We see claims of instant manifestation through the hermetic laws of mental transmutation and the profound Taoist concept of wu wei, where action achieves divine, perfect results with literally zero physical effort. Now, the shared consensus on how this so-called magic works is the most profound part. Because the universe is entirely mental, if you can forcefully and completely change the reality inside your own mind, the external environment literally has no choice but to instantly update and match it. You're basically hitting refresh on the browser of reality. A really famous recorded example of this level of mastery is Mahavatar Babaji. He's the great Siva who reintroduced Kriya Yoga to the world. According to the texts, he achieved complete physical transmutation and immortality. By directly manipulating that underlying source code of reality we talked about, he completely overcame ordinary human physical limitations. The stories say he has maintained his physical form for centuries, existing silently behind the scenes to guide humanity's spiritual evolution.
Section 4. The Mechanics of Magic. So I know what you're thinking. How does a normal person actually acquire these abilities? Let's transition seamlessly into the practical methodologies here, because amazingly, all these completely isolated traditions give us the exact same instruction manual.
Here are the universal, agreed-upon steps to accessing that source code. First, as the beloved Saint Sai Baba taught, you have to start with Shraddha and Sabori. That translates to unwavering faith and immense patience. Second, and this is absolutely crucial, you must practice radical detachment. The Taoists refer to this as mind fasting. You actually have to cease your internal, chattering thoughts completely to reach a state of samadhi. And honestly, this is the great cosmic irony of all this magic. It requires absolute, total, radical detachment. You cannot manipulate reality if you are still desperately attached to the outcome. You literally have to stop caring about the magic to be able to do the magic. So what happens when those frantic, everyday thoughts finally perish? You access what the Yoga Vasista calls the Chitta cause. This is the mental or spiritual ether. You can think of it as this pristine, immaculate state of pure consciousness. This right here is the actual underlying space where levitation, time bending, and instant manifestation take place. When you finally stop feeding your brain the heavy fuel of your own limited, earthly, ego-driven ideas, the true, infinite consciousness can finally shine through unblocked. And that is what enables universe-level changes. Now check out the most striking pattern we found in all of our research. It is remarkably universal how this mechanism is described across entirely different cultures. In Buddhism, the specific term for this self-emptying process is shunyata, meaning emptiness. In Taoism, it is known as Zuowang, which beautifully translates to sitting and forgetting. In Sufism, it's called thena, the total annihilation of the ego. And in Christian mysticism, they call it Gelassenheit, a state of complete let-be or absolute surrender. Relentlessly, over and over, these source texts tell us that whether you are a Taoist monk living in the mountains or a Christian mystic in a European monastery, the prerequisite for tapping into the matrix is identical. You must entirely withdraw the fuel of your own ego. Section 5. The Path of Self-Emptying. Fortunately, to achieve this radical self-emptying, these traditions do not just leave us hanging with vague, abstract concepts. They provide incredibly specific, actionable daily practices.
The practical applications here are really fascinating. On one hand, we see systems like Kriya Yoga, which utilizes intense, highly specific levels of pranayama breathing techniques, mantras, and mudras to systematically accelerate a person's spiritual development. Then there's the practice of continuous remembrance, like the ceaseless chanting of Sai Sai that Sai Baba taught, which acts almost like an anchor to just drown out the endless restlessness of the monkey mind. Or consider the Taoist flow, modeled by the legendary story of Cook Ding, who learned to completely suspend all of his analytical step-by-step calculation to just move effortlessly in divine spontaneity. But the goal is always the same. By controlling the breath through rhythmic chanting or by engaging in pure focused flow states, the internal, noisy vibrations of the human brain literally stop. And when the brain stops projecting, the physical illusion simply dissolves.
The renowned Christian mystic Meister Eckhart actually captured this concept so beautifully. He wrote, "Let us learn self-forgetting until we call nothing more our own." I just love that phrase, self-forgetting. It perfectly underscores the absolute surrender that's required here. The practitioner has to give up their own personal will entirely. You have to get out of your own way so that the divine mind can operate smoothly through you without any of the static created by the ego.
Section 6. The ultimate non-dual reality. And this brings us right to the climax of our explainer today, because while all of these magical capabilities, the levitation, the shrinking, the time bending, the instant manifestation, while they are treated as completely real and fully attainable in these ancient texts, they are actually entirely beside the point. Yeah, you heard that right. True masters simply do not care about walking in the sky. The texts are completely explicit about this fact. The superpowers, the cities, the magic, they are merely a byproduct. They are just a trivial side effect of finally waking up from the dream of physical reality. The true goal, the ultimate destination mapped out across every single one of these diverse traditions, is non-dual union with the divine. It is the breathtaking, life-altering realization of your absolute oneness with the entire universe. And we actually see this incredible non-dual awakening very clearly described in early Christian texts as well. For example, in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus states, "When you make the two one, and when you make the inside like the outside and the outside like the inside, then will you enter the kingdom." It's incredible, right? It reads almost like a technical instruction manual on how to collapse the illusion of separation entirely, so you can finally merge back with the whole. We see this exact same ultimate goal for liberation mirrored seamlessly in Eastern faiths too. In Jainism, the ultimate state is Kavala Jnana, which is achieving pure omniscience and the total isolation of the pure soul from all karmic physical matter. In Sikhism, it is known as mukti, representing the total dissolution of that hamai, the ego, to merge completely and forever with the divine. Breaking the cycle of human suffering always, in every tradition, culminates in escaping that fractured, dualistic computer interface we talked about earlier, and simply returning home to the source code. And that source code, that ultimate reality, is represented across history by one simple, echoing number: 1. In Sikhism, this is beautifully expressed as Ik Onkar, the all. The fundamental unifying truth that has been meticulously mapped out by all of these ancient, isolated texts and now echoed by modern cognitive theories is that there is only one consciousness, and it is simply experiencing itself objectively. To put it simply, you are the universe, looking back at itself. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the underlying blueprint of reality, I want to leave you with a thought to really chew on as you go about your day. If space and time are genuinely just an interface, if your ego and your sense of separation are just an illusion, and if the universe is truly, entirely, beautifully mental, what will you choose to project today? Think about that for a while. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next explainer.